Story 1. I quit about 2 years ago after smoking for about 20 years. The smell was intoxicating to me for the first couple of months after I quit, and then something changed. I am not sure if it was my sense of smell that changed or my brain chemistry, but one day I couldn't stand the smell of it anymore. I had to deep clean all my clothes that still had the trace smell on them, even had to throw some of them out, and get my vehicle deep cleaned professionally a couple of times because it now makes me sick to my stomach. I never thought I would be one of those ex-smokers I used to call hypocrites, but now I completely understand where they were coming from. It's disgusting. Story 2. For those of us smokers who have been a little while without our fix, smell it in the air, and it is similar to what your saliva glands do when you smell a steak on the grill. It makes you crave the taste. Story 3. Seething rage. My mom smoked in the house constantly, even though it made me sick. I didn't even realize how sick it had been making me until I left for college. She died earlier this year. She had healthy lungs, but lots of other health issues that could be attributed to her smoking and alcoholism. I'm left dealing with her house, which will probably still smell like cigarettes long after I'm gone. Story 4. Makes me angry if it's one of those people who is on the footpath in front of me or otherwise puts me in a situation where I cannot avoid the secondhand smoke. Story 5, kind of a weird one, but it's comforting. My dad smoked a lot of cigarettes growing up, so I started to associate the smell of them with him. Despite how awesome of a father he was, we grew apart as I got older due to his drug problem. I guess it's comforting because it's nostalgic. It takes me back to my happy, innocent childhood days. Haha. Story 6. Weirdly nostalgic because my neighbor's attractive older sister smoked. And my ex smoked a lot too, and we always had intense, passionate sex. Obviously, it depends on the source, but I have a slight interest in women who smoke. Story 7. I'm okay with it so long as it's not overwhelming. I can stand a faint smell as my mother used to smoke, so growing up, I was always okay with it. But as long as the person doesn't reek of cigarettes, then it's whatever. But in general, someone shouldn't smell like cigarettes because it's still unpleasant and probably worse for others. Story 8. I like a little smell here and there. It reminds me of when I was probably 12 to 13, sneaking used cigarettes from the gas stations, then hiding them near my house in an Altoids tin in the bushes for later. Story 9. I don't smoke. I did for a short time years ago, but the smell never bothered me even before I started to smoke myself. That was when I was 19 in Vietnam, but I'm 74 now. In my youth, everyone smoked, so I was used to it. Story 10. I smoked for 24 years and quit 4 years ago. I still love the smell of a freshly lit cigarette, but anything beyond that I can't stand. I especially dislike the smell it leaves on a person who just smoked. I don't know why it's different. Story 11. I can't stand it. Even though I smoked for 20 years, since I quit, it makes me sick. Especially any area outside where people smoke, it lingers forever. Story 12. As an ex-smoker, I now absolutely hate it. I have no idea how I put up with it for the cool kid image. Now it makes me feel sick and gives me a headache fast. I make a point of asking people to move away when they stand on a busy footpath or right outside a door in public smoking. Story 13. It's kind of pleasantly nostalgic. My great-grandma was a heavy smoker, so I find the smell pleasant even if I'd never want to smoke. But then, I've never been exposed to it for long periods of time since I was quite small either. Story 14. I do not mind it that much with a few exceptions. Like I do not care if I am next to a smoker outside and I catch a whiff, or if someone comes in after a cigarette and the smell is on their coat. That is fine. But if I walk into a room that is hazy and it smells like the ashtray has been overflowing since 1993, it is pretty gross. That old, stale cigarette smell. Flashbacks to visiting chain-smoking relatives as a kid. Story 15. I find the smell of cigarettes unpleasant and overpowering. It clings to clothes, lingers in the air, and often gives me headaches. While some may not mind it, I try to avoid it. Many smokers do not realize how much the smell sticks to them, but it is hard to miss. Story 16. It used to make me sick for the rest of the day, including a bad headache, if someone lit up specifically in a car. This was in the days when people smoked in cars without asking if you minded, Smoked on airplanes, restaurants, offices, everywhere. It was awful. Story 17. Intensely. Nicotine vapes too. Headache first, strong enough to pretty much debilitate me. Then either my throat closes up or I get stomach issues, or perhaps both. The effects usually last about 4 to 24 hours. Story 18. I've never smoked, but both of my parents did and occasionally still do. I really, really hate the smell. It is repugnant and it makes me not want to be around anyone who smells like it. Story 19. My neighbors are big-time chain smokers, especially when they are drinking. They are good people and I like talking with them, but that cigarette smell gets right into my clothes, hair, and skin. Whenever I come back into my house, I need to change clothes and take a shower to remove the stink. Story 20. Migraine trigger for me, but more often I get sick to my stomach from the scent before the migraine kicks in. Also, it is a deal breaker for me. The smell is absolutely repulsive to me, and I could not date anyone who smokes. Story 21. Ugh. Honestly, the smell of cigarettes hits me like a wall. It makes me feel kind of nauseous, and it gets into my clothes and hair and stays there for hours. I just do not get how people can stand it. It is not even just the smell. There is this weird taste that sticks in your mouth too, and it just makes me feel like I am suffocating. I get that some people are used to it, but for me, it is a major turnoff. Story 22. To me, it falls into the hazardous chemicals range of smells like spray paint, gasoline, or bug spray. It is very chemical smelling to me. My brain immediately goes, "This is hazardous, and you shouldn't be breathing it. You need to leave right now." Story 23 reminds me of my grandmother and uncle. Both passed away before 50. Makes me think of poor decisions and sad lives. There is no faster way to make me lose interest in someone. Story 24. I have never been a smoker and generally do not like it, but sometimes it gives me a nostalgic feeling of being in a convenience store or restaurant when I was a kid, or hanging out with groups of smokers in college outside of parties. Story 25. Oddly, it reminds me of European cities. I'm not knocking our friends on the other side of the pond, but smoking is so much more prevalent over there versus the United States that I associate the smell of them to it. Story 26. I do not like it, but I tolerate it. I quit smoking on Memorial Day 2014 and have not smoked since. I moved my mother in with me and she smokes. I let her smoke in the house. I just avoid her when it gets to be too much. Story 27. It's interesting for me. It makes me feel like I'm on vacation. As a kid, we would go on cruises a lot and I would walk through the casino on the ship. The smell brings me right back to that. Laugh out loud. Story 28. Fresh? Not a big deal, the wind usually takes it. Old? Really gross. Old and wet? Actively rude. I quit 2 weeks ago cold turkey. Half of the people I work with smoke, and they are often wet from the rain. Story 29. I have asthma and a chest condition, and love the smell. It's ironic, but my dad was a big smoker growing up, so it kind of brings up some sad nostalgia. Story 30. I don't hate it, but this year I had a severe case of bronchitis that lasted about 11 months, and because of that, now the smoke makes me cough a lot and have difficulty breathing during the episode, so I try to avoid it. Story 31. I like it because it reminds me of my mom. I used to smoke, but even before that, I enjoyed the smell because my mom used to work in a game room that had slot machines, and many of the patrons would smoke. Whenever she came home after work, her clothes would smell like cigarettes when I went to hug her. Story 32. As a former smoker who went through hell to quit, the best way I can describe the smell of secondhand smoke is the scene from Finding Nemo with Bruce the shark when the blood runs across his nose, his pupils dilate, and he goes crazy. That's me. Story 33. I grew up in a home where my parents smoked. My mom still does, but not much, and every time she is over, I have her go to the fire escape old building, where she can smoke. Even during family gatherings and in her own home, she goes outside to smoke, as that stuff will stain the walls. Dad smoked like a chimney, rest in peace, and I think he might have continued if he were still alive. I can tolerate the smoke. That's just it. I can't fault my mom for still smoking. It is a habit hard to toss away, and she is aware of it. Story 34. Ex-smoker and hometown Las Vegas. Oddly reminds me of old Las Vegas when you could smoke in corner stores, the grocery stores where the slot machines were. That smell just reminds me of my weird childhood in the 80s and early 90s. Oddly, I think that's when I started smoking. When I moved away in 2010, I missed the smells of home to have some peace of my own. I miss old Las Vegas sometimes for the cheap prices. But going on a year with no smoking. Story 35. I smoked for many years. I quit for the last 12 years. The actual smoke from a cigarette I don't mind at all. But the smell of someone who has just had one or the stale smell of a cigarette is gross to me. Story 36. I can't stand even a whiff of secondhand cigarette smoke. I'm instantly coughing to the point of practically hacking up a lung, and I feel like I'm going to vomit. It's weird, though. When I was a kid, my father's parents would often act as babysitters when my parents were at work and I was off school. The pair of them smoked like chimneys, and I was completely fine. But nowadays, absolutely no. I don't understand how anybody can still be on those death sticks. They're practically burning money just to poison their own lungs. Why? Story 37. Enough that I missed my family Christmas because I don't want to smell it or smell like it, and my mom smokes in her house. Even if she doesn't smoke while we are there, the smell is all over you and in the air. I have asthma. Story 38. Met mine in the least romantic place possible. The Department of Motor Vehicles. We were both waiting for our numbers to be called, started complaining about the wait, and found out we had a lot in common, like a shared love for bad puns and good coffee. We exchanged numbers before we got called up, and the rest is history. Guess you could say our love was registered right from the start. Story 39. Smoked for a long time. Had a kid, and every once in a while, I'll have one. But oh my God, the smell is overwhelming. I had no idea it was that bad. I'm so sorry, everyone else. If I smoke now, I run far away from any other people, wear a jacket I can take off to help reduce the smell, and wash up afterward. It still lingers. Story 40. Quit smoking after around 20 years a while back. The smell of a cigarette makes me want a cigarette. If they invented a pill that cut my chance of cancer to almost none, I would go buy a pack of Camel menthol lights the same day. Smoking was one of the most relaxing things for me. Calmed me down. It helped me think. And that Saturday morning smoke on the front porch with a cup of tea or coffee was something I always looked forward to. I'd sit out there and read a book or magazine, smoke 4 to 5 cigarettes, and just kind of chill out and forget everything for a while. I quit because of health issues and the cost of it. I'm still a slave to nicotine. I vape and use various nicotine pouches, but tobacco products aren't something I buy anymore. But if I'm being honest, none of the replacement things even come close to the feel of a cigarette. Story 41. I get a histamine reaction to them where my nose won't stop running, and then if it's really bad, I usually wake up with a sore throat. This is why I don't let people smoke in my place. It's not worth it. Story 42. Hate it, hate the smell. But I can't help but find comfort in it as my mom was and is a heavy smoker. I grew up with it, and therefore, when I smell it, it takes me back to a safer and simpler time. Story 43. As someone who used to be a smoker and quit a handful of times, it brings back a sense of nostalgia. It doesn't smell great, but it does bring up fond memories, social conversations, stress relief from jobs, and being with friends who got me started in the first place. Story 44. I cannot even remember the last time I smelled it. People pretty much never smoke in public anymore, and I even live in the state with the second highest smoking rate in the country. That being said, it is not a pleasant smell. Story 45. Reminds me of my dad anytime I smell it, brings back memories of how close we were during my childhood. Also makes me cough sometimes because of my asthma. Story 46. My parents used to smoke, and I would get so mad, spending time to get ready and leaving the house smelling like smoke. I hated it so much, so I obviously never smoked and would not have married a smoker either. Story 47. I used to smoke and always smelled like an ashtray. I didn't think that, but other people did for sure. I got out of jail and stopped smoking because of how it made you smell, plus it was time to stop anyway. Now I always get people saying I smell good even though I'm not wearing any cologne. I've been able to score more with the ladies. Overall, it's helped my attractiveness and confidence in a major way. Plus, you don't want your first impression smelling like an ashtray. Story 48. I do not mind it until people start smelling like they have not showered in days. Been there, done that. Thank God I have a place where I can shower and have access to my own necessities. Story 49. As a general aura, a faint whiff, it feels nostalgic and reminds me of old relatives. Being around people who smoke or are smoking, much less kissing or snuggling them, is absolutely vile. Story 50. Really depends. I am an ex-smoker, 2-pack-a-day man for 4 years. If I smell a burning cigarette, I get an instant headache and feel nauseous. But the smell of a fresh pack makes me insatiable for one. Story 51. Ah, Dad. Back when you promised you wouldn't smoke or drink around me and my brother, and we believed you. And then you tried to kill yourself when we were visiting you in Los Angeles, 2 hours away from our mom, and had to watch the emergency medical technicians wheel you away on a stretcher and be driven in a police car to our aunt's in Long Beach until our mom could get to us at 11 p.m. Yeah, I'm no contact with my dad. Story 52. I just moved in right next to my mom's place so we can help each other since we have the same illness, and often when I go in there, the odor is so heavy in the air that my nose instantly starts tickling. If I'm in there long enough, I get sniffly or sneeze. It's not like there's lingering smoke, at least not visibly, but it's so bad.